Well, good afternoon, morning, or evening from wherever you're catching us from. It is another beautiful Wednesday. It's Winning Wednesday. So, today, how can we win? Well, if you will listen to our new guest today, you'll learn how you can win by doing some strategic things which he has done to change his whole life, which totally, I'm just so in awe of him because of what he's accomplished. Nicole, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Longest day of the year, so we got a lot of daylight going on out there. So that'll be fun. It's still rainy in South Carolina here though, so I get about one day of sunshine and a couple days of rain and but hanging in there with the humidity. But I'm really excited to meet our guest today too.
So let me tell you about this gentleman. You know what? Part of our, just before I go into it, for who people that have been watching us and staying tuned, let's get real. We're all about empowering you and helping you grow and helping you through some of the traumatic things in your life, or sometimes what knocks you down, and sometimes not all of us can just get back up. Well, our guest today has had that happen to him. And we talk about having guilty pleasures in our life, and sometimes it can be foods, which sometimes are not the greatest things for us, and all different other things that we do to ourselves. But it's also a completely human response to seeking sometimes the comforts in our own lives. But when we're really stressed out, those are the times when we jump into things that aren't usually the best things for us. And that's also because of our willpower being very low. And it's no secret that these things that we shouldn't do is what we do. And, with our guest, he had gone from smoking and indulging in junk food and obvious choices that were detrimental to his own well being. However, moments of weakness that challenged him of his understanding of self-care. And Michael from Unbroken battled with his own addictions. He came to realize that certain triggers that compelled him to seek instant gratification from vices like smoking and fast foods, despite being aware of their harm that they had caused him. However, he transformed himself and shifted, and then started to recognize that his trauma and his lack of self love were driving him towards self destruction behavior. He made the decision to grant himself the permission to love and care for himself, which ultimately transformed his approach to dealing with his trauma. Michael's story is one of triumph in serving and inspiration to anyone working through their own trauma. Today, I'd like to introduce you to Michael from Unbroken, who will share with us how he moved behind the difficult life of experiences to find his clarity. And with that, Michael, welcome so much today to Let's Get Real.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here with you.
Oh, thank you so much for joining me. I first heard you on Clubhouse, and
Mm.
I was sitting there, as I do for most mornings, as I'm getting ready. I turn on Clubhouse of Champion, Champion Breakfast for. I'm blowing the title of it. Um, but as I'm sitting there listening on Clubhouse, and you came upon telling your story, and all of a sudden, from sort of not there, all of a sudden I had to stop, and I was blown away, and thinking, we've all had challenges in our life, but not what you had gone through. And for that, my heart was so broken by listening to what a child had to go through. Because as a mom, I take all children and would love to embrace them all and love them and kiss them and do nothing but good to them. But when you hear, because so many people carry that trauma through them for the rest of their lives and it affects their entire life, to hearing what you have accomplished, I knew that we had to bring you on today. And I'm so grateful that you've come. Would you be so kind to share your story so our guests can understand, and maybe we can help somebody else to come through and deal with their own trauma?
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for having me. I love doing the clubhouse, the breakfast of champions.
Thank you.
Yeah, I get it. And it's so early too. Like sometimes, it's 6 a.m. I'm on the Pacific time, and like to turn your brain on at that hour is really difficult. You know, I always like to create context in this first and foremost. You know, everybody's story is different. My hope is that people will not compare theirs to mine, because I realize like my story sounds like something out of a horror movie. Like I know that, right? But sometimes when people compare, they're missing the fact that it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter what happened to me because your life and my life are not the same. And we can go as deep as you guys want. I mean, I'm pretty transparent about all this. So first and foremost, you know, at 4 years old, my mother, who is a drug addict and alcoholic, actually cut off my right index finger. And so I had multiple skin grafts, multiple surgeries, multiple trips to the hospital about that. She married my stepdad when I was about 6. And, you know, this is a guy 6'4", 220, NFL linebacker size, beating up a 7-year-old, you know, put me in the hospital multiple times. And he was a coward, just to be straight up. Anybody who hits a kid's a coward, period. And so, you know, we spent the majority of our childhood homeless and deeply in poverty. In fact, I lived with over 30 different families between 8 to 12 years old, getting bounced around place to place to place, never really knowing where I'm going to land, never having, you know, security or safety or some of those core needs that kids have. When I was 12, my grandmother adopted me. I had been living in my stepdad's mother's abandoned house on the corner of 30th and Georgetown for about 6 weeks in the middle of August in Indiana, where I was like going to the big lots right there next to the Coke lot, stealing food every day, showering at summer school. And my mom had just kind of disappeared. So my stepdad and her had a divorce. I don't know where he was. She is on a bender somewhere, God knows where. And one day my grandmother came to check on me after not hearing from us for a while. And at that point brought me into her home. A little bit down the road, she would actually legally adopt me. Now, in a lot of ways, that's a godsend, right?
Yeah.
But I'm biracial, black and white, and my grandma's an old racist white lady from a town in Tennessee you never heard of. And so, I mean, so much so we weren't allowed to have black people in our house. And there was a copy of Hitler's autobiography, Mein Kampf, in our kitchen, right? My uncle's a part of the Aryan Brotherhood. I mean, you talk about the ultimate freaking identity crisis. And so, like anyone would do at 12 years old, I started doing drugs, smoking weed, popping pills. By 13, I'm getting drunk. And by 15, I'm getting kicked out of school. I got caught selling drugs. And so now I'm in just this chaos of life where I'm breaking into houses, stealing cars, getting shot at by the police, just the craziest things that you can imagine, just trying to survive.
Yeah.
Right. I get put into a last chance program, end up not graduating high school. And as I'm 18, I'm sitting in my car one day. I got fired from a warehouse job. Like I was putting microchips into motherboards on an assembly line for freaking 13 hours a day. And I got fired, and I was sitting in my car. I'm like, all right, hold on. This is ridiculous. Like a monkey could do this job. What is happening here? And I was like, I'm not getting out of this car until I come up with a solution for what was happening in my life, for the poverty, for the abuse, for the homelessness. And the only thing that made sense to me was money, right? Because it was like, what else could it be? Because this is the one thing we've never had. And so if we've never had this one thing and we have to deal with all these evictions, these repos, the drug abuse, the homelessness, the abuse, like all the, it must be money. Like that's the only logical thing. So I made a declaration to myself. By the time I was 21, I wanted to make $100,000 a year legally. And that felt really important to me because the legal part, especially, I'd been handcuffed more times than I can count. I got family in prison for life, literally to this day. And my 3 childhood best friends were murdered. And so it's like, I know the path I'm going if I don't change something. And so I worked, I built skills have utility. I found different avenues that I was good at. And right as I was turning 21, I landed a job with a Fortune 10 company. No high school diploma, no college education. And by the time I was 26, I made almost $1 million. Now, the hard part about that is that I was 350 pounds, smoking 2 packs a day, drinking myself to sleep, cheating on my girlfriend. I was $50,000 in debt. My car got repoed, and my little brother told me, never talk to me again. You're not my brother. And
Wow.
so on paper, like, people would look at my life and be like, man, this guy came from nothing and he created all these things and it's great, blah, blah, blah. But my life was a complete disaster. And basically I hit rock bottom. And when I did, it was either I'm going to die or I'm going to change my life, but it can't be what it was. And that was 13 years ago.
Wow, that's all it was.
Whew, that's some heavy stuff right there. I mean, it's almost, I sit there and listen to you and I know you're telling me what happened, but it's just, as a mother, you know, it's just mind boggling that someone could do that to their child. That's crazy.
But we also realize that when a person is under the influence of drugs and alcohol and everything of us, they're not in the right mind. So I'm not trying to give her or give anybody, a way out or anything like that. Like I said right at the beginning, I'm a mom too, and um, I see a child at any point. My thing is to reach out with love, not with anything but that. But for yourself to even have that assumption to actually start thinking in those terms that you want to get out, because the problem is there's so many kids that end up where they're in life where they're involved with crime and all the rest, and they just get deeper into it. They don't even have those awakenings. What made you sort of start thinking in that way? Because that's a very different, especially with everything you're surrounded with.
Yeah, well, I think part of it, I guess if there's a silver lining in all this chaos, one of the things I had to do, living with all these different families, as I was exposed to so many different homes, like literal, like actual homes and environments and cars and clothing and the way that people communicated with each other and food. And like, it was like kind of a oddly worldly experience. And, one of the things I noticed for a lot of these families is like, they didn't have homes that were full of rats and roaches like mine. Their kids didn't have to sleep on the floor like I did because they didn't have a bed. Right. And so I was exposed to like this different potential of reality. And when I was 18, so I'd got a call from my best friend, and him and I did everything together. I mean, everything. He lived 3 doors down from me. And the first time we did drugs was together. First time we got drunk together, many, many, many firsts. And he calls me. I had made this decision in high school. I wanted to I just wanted to get out. And so I got super focused. And in fact, one semester of high school, I actually had straight A's, believe it or not, because
Nice.
I was like, I'm getting focused. I got to get out of here. This is not what I want. And so he calls me, comes over, and he's like, hey, man, I've got a line on some cocaine. We have to drive to the north side of town to get it. Now, I'm like 5 weeks away from graduation at this point, right?
Right.
And so I'm sitting out the door and I look at him and I'm like, I'm not going with you. And you have to understand, this is my best friend. We're closer than brothers. And I could just see the heartbreak in his face. He had dropped out of school. He was a year younger than me. He dropped out. And I was like, dude, I'm getting out of this city. I'm getting out of this town. Like, I'm done, man. I'm staying focused here. Well, the next day, his mom calls me and she's like, hey, did you hear from him last night? Because we talked every day. And she's like, I was like, no, I didn't. The next day goes by. I didn't hear from him. I go over to her house, his house 3 doors down, knock on the door, go say, hey, is he home? Like, what's the deal? And she goes, yeah, he's fine, but he's in jail. So
Wow.
on the way home from this purchasing of this cocaine, his taillight was out on the car and he got pulled over. And luckily he was a minor, right? I
Mhm.
wasn't. If
Yeah.
I got in the car that day, there's no way I'm talking to you right now.
Yeah.
0% chance. I would probably still be in jail because Indiana was very strict on drug laws, especially 20 years ago. And so my point in telling you this story is that there were these moments of time in childhood as a kid, as a teenager, where even though everything around me said don't trust myself, I did it anyway. And I can point to hundreds of those scenarios in which those small incremental decisions kept me out of prison, probably kept me alive. Actually, I know for sure kept me alive. And then when I was in this space of just trying to figure out how to navigate what I wanted next, to answer your question, it was looking at life about all the things I didn't want. I didn't want homelessness anymore. I didn't want poverty anymore. I didn't want bill collectors anymore. Now, it took me a while to get to that place because obviously I shared I pretty much ruined my life, even though I'd made like $1 million. But it was like there was this healing journey that had to take place for me to be okay with having abundance and having fulfillment and joy and hope and prosperity and love and connection and all of those things. But I guess I've always known who I am. I'm not saying I've always honored that because I've silenced it a lot. A lot of that has been protective, but there were always like the pivotal cornerstone moments. I always just went against what everyone told me or said I should do, and I just trusted myself.
Well, that's huge to be able to trust yourself because, that's one of the things that a lot of people actually don't have, that ability to trust themselves, but for other reasons of something. So to have gone through that life cycle, bless you, that you have gone through and that you didn't, then you actually trusted yourself says a lot about, your own self of what happened. So somewhere along the line, you've picked something up. But I am posing like to have that exposure to all these homes actually did you good instead of doing anything else for you.
Yeah. It's really odd to think about. I mean, I didn't really understand that even until probably 6 or 7 years ago. And I just looked back on those moments. It one of the things, like, it was insane to me. I'll never forget this. We were at this family's like island kitchen, and they're in this really nice house, and the carpets were clean, and there were no bugs anywhere, and their air conditioner worked, and like the whole thing. And this kid like talked back to his dad. I'll never forget this. And his dad didn't slam him to the ground. And I was like, this is a thing. So even like what you would look at as like, duh, that's common sense, changed my perception of the world.
Wow, you were really one of the lucky ones too, because you hear that many houses, you hear so many horror stories about what's happening to children when they're there.
I
They're not
have
treated
those stories. So
fairly.
let me be very clear about that.
Okay.
The thing that I always think about, and especially in conversations like this, I always ask myself, does my darkness bring light? Right? I mean, we can go as dark as you want to go. Trust me, I've, having done this thousands of times over the last 8 years, I've kind of zeroed in on the thing, right? Obviously, anybody who does this professionally knows that. But I mean, there's levels and scopes of depths of things that are so incredibly dark between, getting locked in vans of these people and, being molested by one of the mothers of the church that I experience. And it's like, there is innate darkness in the world, right? But there's also a lot of beauty. And so I'm not an optimistic person. I don't look at the world glass half full. I go, it's a glass, right? I'm very much a realist. And so in that realist approach to life, it's like there are very, very horrible things that I've both bared witness to and happened to me in that window. But it's always, Nicole, just for clarity, I always just look, I go, how does this story help somebody today? The truth is, it may actually not. And so that's why I always say I can go as deep as people want to go on this, but it's about looking at one simple reality for me, and that's that there's no lucky kid who goes through any of this, and there are scars and memories and things that I carry with me, that my brothers carry, that the kids that I knew carry, that they don't go away. I just look at it, I go, I don't know that this has to be public. right? Maybe it does. And maybe that's just a part as I go deeper into this, I'll share more. But I mean, some of it's so dark. It's like between my therapist and my journal, it'll never see the light of day.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you know, you're such an enigma in terms of what you're doing now and what you're speaking about, and you know, the amazing things you've done just to pull yourself out of that. So kudos to you. This is it's a story that just you know, it kind of takes your breath away just to hear what little you've told us in 20 minutes. And then you say there's more and there's darker. So that's wow, what a journey.
And nobody should be going through it. But, you know, I commend you for doing what you're doing and putting it out there, because unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are following that same journey in their life. And, you know, it's happening far too much than what we like to. But tell me something now that you've come out and hopefully you've done a lot of healing through the years, and been able to now create a new life for yourself. And I heard that at one point you were like 300 pounds or something like that, so you had to go through a lot to get through, you know, and you were obviously taking those emotions and eating them down to push them out of you or push them down so you didn't have to revert to that. But now you are doing so much with others. Tell me about this, what you're doing from that horrendous part of life does come some light.
Yeah. Well, so I hit this rock bottom moment, you know, 2025 heading into 26. And I had called my little brother one day because I'd made the decision. I was like, you know what, I'm going to start like trying to like do something about all this. Because it didn't make, I was like, okay, why do I make all this money and I lose it? Why do I get an amazing relationship and then I cheat? Why do I start going to the gym and then I quit? Why do I not smoke a cigarette for a day and then I'm back on too bad? It was like, what am I missing here? Right. And I was just like, I'm going to start doing this, like putting real effort into it. And so one day I'm in the gym and I call my little brother. He had done multiple tours in Afghanistan. He had been home for a couple of months. I had not called him, connect, nothing, right? I'm just like in my own planet. And I call him and I'm like, hey man, what's up? And he goes, what do you want? I'm like, hey, I just, you know, I haven't talked to you in a while. Just wanted to see how you're doing, man, and connect with you. And he goes, don't talk to me. You're not my brother. And he hung up the phone on me.
Wow.
And a little bit after that, like I think it was later that week, I'm laying in bed, you know, and I always want to make this context. 26 to 30 years old are the hardest 4 years of my life. No questions asked, because I was like brainwashing myself, right? I'm like one step forward, 10 steps backwards. And it's like, I kept trying and trying and trying. The biggest thing I always try to teach people is like, yeah, you're going to screw up. You're going to make mistakes. Just get back up. Right. And so I'm like in get back up mode constantly. And so I'm laying in bed. Saturday, it's like 11 o'clock in the morning. And again, at this point, I'm 350 pounds. I'm eating chocolate cake, smoking a joint, and watching the CrossFit games. Like I'm like at rock bottom. Like it could not probably be worse than this, right? And I pick myself up, I go in the bathroom, I'm looking at myself in the mirror, and I remembered being 8 years old. And the water company had come and turned our water off. I grew up in America, in Indianapolis, in the United States, the greatest country in the world. And we were so poor because of my mother's addiction and my stepfather's lack of information on how to use money that they turned our water off. And so my mom says, go across the street to the neighbor's house and get water. Don't knock on the door. Just do it and come back home. So I go in the backyard. I get this little blue bucket. I walk across the street to our neighbor's house. And for the first time, I stole water. And I remember being like, when I'm a grown up, this will not be my life. And it wasn't in a lot of ways, because here I am and look on paper, people are like, your life's not so bad compared to what you came from, right? Yeah. But as I'm looking in this mirror, I'm like, this is not what I want. This is not who I want to be. And I asked myself this question. I was like, what are you willing to do to have the life that you want to have?
Great question.
That was the question. I have no idea where it came from. That just was the question. And here's something that I'm going to say that's really interesting and probably counter to a lot of what we hear about this healing journey. I was so tired of my shit that I was berating myself. I was like, you are such a loser. You are making this decision every day. You are doing this. Nobody else. You're the one showing up, playing like a victim, blaming the world. It's everybody's fault but Michael's. You're being a piece of shit to your brothers, to your friends, to yourself. Look at, you're poisoning yourself every day. You are a loser. And there is something about acknowledging that for me, and I'm not saying this is for everybody, let's be very clear, but for me, that's what I needed. I didn't grow up in coddling and hugs and affirmations. I grew up in hell. And so cuddlings and hugs and affirmations don't do a lot for me.
Yeah, they were foreign.
That's exactly right. And so I'm in this moment and I'm like, what are you willing to do? And the answer was no excuses, just results. That one moment singularly started the change of my life. And it was just painful again and again and again, of like one step forward, a billion steps backwards. And what happened in this process as I was healing, I started to mend the relationship first and foremost with myself. I started doing the things I said I was going to do. I stopped making excuses. I stopped hanging around with people who sucked, and I did what I said I was going to do. And in that process, I mended relationships with my siblings. And in that process, I started getting very deep into this journey where it was, and even to this day, my singular focus is personal development and mental health. All the books, all the conferences, all the podcasts, all the events, all the coaching I get my hands on. And today I've had the benefit of working with some of the greatest minds in the world, from Tony Robbins and David Meltzer to Anthony Trucks and Eric Thomas and Marie Forleo and Brene Brown and all these people.
Wow.
But it wasn't that when I started. So I was like, I'm going to do whatever it takes. And I'm going to go to the library and get some late fees. All right. And so as I went through, I just started blogging, right? I was just writing content. I was sharing it on the internet under a assumed name. Nobody knew it was me. And people just kept reaching out to me. And they're like, will you help me? I was like, no. I'm good. I don't want to do that. And they're like, and then some people were persistent. They're like, hey, no, I can see that you can help me. Please help me. And I was like, okay, cool. Let's see what happens. And then if you fast forward today, I mean, I've coached thousands of people. I've spoken on some of the biggest stages in the world. I've written a best-selling book. Our podcast will do like 2 million downloads this year, blah, 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 blah. But all of that stuff aside, it was me first. That's all it was. And as I continue to progress in this journey, the more I help people, the more healed I become. And I didn't sign up to be the trauma guy. I'm good. I don't want this job. I don't even like this job. But I feel like I have an obligation, because every single day I get to watch my brothers' lives be completely different, is a reminder of why I do this. Do I get to help my clients? Absolutely. It's great. I love it. Do I get to speak on giant stages with super famous people? Yep, sure do. But it has nothing on planet Earth compares to my little brother calling me one day. The same brother who told me never to talk to me again calls me one day and he's like, man, I quit drinking.
Wow. Did he turn his life around?
Both my brothers and my sister's lives are completely different. Right. And my life is too. And obviously I think that I've led that charge. Right. But I've also did my part of realizing, like, your siblings don't want to listen to you, dude. Shut up. And so I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to send them podcasts and I'll take them to events and we'll go meet Tony Robbins together and blah, 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 blah. And that's it. And then so they get to have a different life. And because of that, it keeps pulling me forward. Because I'm good. Like, I love my life. And part of me, and this is really true, what I'm about to say, if I wake up tomorrow and I don't want to do Think Unbroken anymore, it's done. Overnight, I'm closing it all down. You'll never find me again. But until that moment, I'm going to keep showing up and keep helping people.
Nice. I love it.
Wow. And I'm just curious, where is your mother now in all of this? Were you able to help her at all? Or is that just a thing of the past and it wasn't possible?
So at 18 years old, my mother had gotten sober for the first time. She was massively addicted to prescription drugs and alcohol. I watched Oxycontin destroy my family, right? We all know what Oxycontin did in the 90s. It's now what fentanyl is doing today,
Yes.
right? And so Oxycontin destroyed my whole family. I hate pharmaceutical companies more than probably anything on planet Earth. And my mom had went through a couple of these bouts of sobriety. Well, as I'm 18, heading into the second half of my senior year, my grandmother's in a coma. She had a heart attack. My grandma fucking smoked a pack a day and ate White Castle, if you guys know what that is, and drank beer every day. Every day. This is what she did. My grandma was incredibly unhealthy. She had a heart attack, fell into a coma. She was in a coma for a couple of months. She comes, and I'm a senior in high school, right? And my little brother's a sophomore, and we're living in a house by ourselves again, digging in cow pizza because we didn't know to like go to the grocery store because we're 17, right? And so my grandmother comes out of the coma. My mom is sober for the first time that I really ever remember. And my grandmother says, "You need to go take care of your boys, go move into the house." Shortly after, my grandmother gets out of the hospital. She gets to come back home. But I mean, still now she's on an oxygen tank at home. She's convalescent, whatever that word is, right? And so she's barely there. Within 3 weeks of my mom being in this home with my grandmother, my mother was drinking a gallon of vodka a day again.
Oh, goodness.
And so the thing that I didn't understand then, because how could you possibly, that I know now, she was in the place of her trauma and abuse. And I had a therapist one time. I was so mad, Nicole. I was sitting in the therapist's office. We're in Portland, Oregon. It's Daniel. This guy changed my life forever. It's another rainy Wednesday, 5 p.m., same cup of stupid tea, same chair, same dumb room for years. And I look at Daniel, I go, "I'm tired of being in this room with you, man. I'm tired of your face. I love you, dude, but this sucks. I hate cleaning up this mess that I didn't make." And he goes, "Yeah, I get it. You deserve to feel that way." And he goes, "Let me ask you a question." He said something incredibly profound to me. Changed my life, actually. He goes, "Let me ask you a question. You don't have to answer it, but I just want you to think about it." I go, "Yeah, whatever, dude." I'm very like, at this moment, because I'm just really in an ornery mood for the fact that now here I am years into this journey, and I feel like even though I was growing, it wasn't like I'm healed. And then I discovered, obviously, this journey is a lifetime process, right? So I'm sitting there with him. He goes, "Have you ever thought about what your mother's childhood was like?"
Mm,
And I was like, "Nope."
ouch. Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there. My mother is now drinking a gallon of vodka a day again, crashes her car again, showing up trashed to all of our events, all of our family gatherings, the whole nine. And one night she comes into my bedroom, high out of her mind, and starts attacking me. And I kicked her to the ground. I never hit my mom. My mom beat the shit out of me constantly. I never touched her one time. But this night I was done, and I kicked her to the ground, and I stood over her, and I said, "If you ever touch me again, I will kill you."
Wow.
And I meant it. And I told her in that moment, I said, "I will never talk to you again." And until the day she died, I talked to her maybe twice. And fast forward to 24 years old, I get a call from my little brother. And he goes, "Hey, man, mom's dead." I go, "Cool, have a great day." And I hung up the phone.
Wow.
And I come to find out she had lost both of her legs to her addiction and died in some random hotel in the middle of nowhere, Indiana. And I remember being in that moment. And this is a weird thing for people to understand unless you've lived in this kind of world. When he told me that, I had more peace in my life than I've ever experienced. And so as I've gone deeper into this journey, I look at this experience with her, and people often ask me, "Don't you regret not reaching out, this and that?" I'm like, "No, not at all. Not at all. I did what I had to do." And this is the thing I teach my clients. The number one thing that I teach my clients, whether they're 18, and I've coached people who are 66 years old, doctors and lawyers, executives at companies we all know, who are regular moms and dads and everything in between. And the one thing that always comes up is I have to teach them how to have boundaries with their parents. I had done everything in my power. My mom used to drag us to AA meetings when I was 10 years old and look at me and my brothers and be like, I'm in this room because of you guys. Just the most narcissistic, abusive shit you can imagine. And so at 18, when I made that decision, to this day, it is the hardest choice I have ever made, period. Nothing comes remotely close, but it is the greatest decision of my entire life.
Well, when you have somebody who's pushing you down, you cannot, it's a matter of self-survival. So you have to take, it's you or them. So you made that decision, and good for you, because not being, a, you know, a, it's such a young person to be able to make that choice and know you in deep down inside that it is the right choice. But
That
also,
was another one of those trusting myself moments.
and just going back, and I know because I've said this many a times, and I've thought about it through my own life, and I've said that to even my own children, of how do you heal the most sometimes if somebody hurts you, is by looking at where they come from. It doesn't excuse them, but it makes them much more understanding of why somebody is the way they are, because they've learned that from somewhere else. Doesn't mean you have to accept it, but it's part of the healing for you, and that's the whole core of everything, right? Is healing yourself first.
Yeah, and in that, I think one of the things that happens is too, it humanizes people, right? We forget, especially now, it's like the pressure we put on other people is asinine. For
Yeah.
perfection, to be this way, to be this kind of lover, this kind of husband, this kind of it's like, bro, you're a horrible person too. You're barely tolerable, and you're holding people to this high standard. Like, what are you thinking about? And so in those moments where you can humanize another person, even if it's a person who you could categorize as horrible, right? I think, and a lot of people will be like, your mom was one of the worst moms of all time. I go, maybe. I don't know. I didn't have all the moms. I had this one. And to look at her experience, to know the abuse that she went through, to know the fact that my grandmother literally packed up and ran from her husband, right? In the 50s, where you could smack your wife, right? You know what I'm saying? Like that world. And imagine the things that her kids went through in that home, right? One of her kids is in prison. Think about this. One of my grandma's kids in prison for life. One of my grandma's kids, my mother, became a drug addict and alcoholic who destroyed her life and the life of her children. One of them became a narcissistic, manic, depressive, bipolar psychopath who is probably arguably one of the meanest people I've ever met. And the other one just left, ghost, for 30 years. Think about that.
Yeah.
That's a
Right.
lot to even assimilate that could happen to that many people in that one family.
And that's generational trauma. And then I go, what was it like for my grandmother? And then you
Yeah.
go down this path. And then you look at 200 years and you add in the slave trade on the black side of my family. And then you add in the fact that I'm Irish and the chaos of growing of Ireland in the 1700s. Like, this doesn't end. Generationally, we carry 7 generations of DNA with us, right? People don't
Yeah.
think about that. They just think because they're born today that somehow the past doesn't influence them. And I'm not Mr. Woo-woo guy. I'm not. I don't believe in most of it, but I do believe in science, and science points to the fact that we carry the DNA of our ancestors. We all do, collectively, from whatever this thing began. And so to be dismissive of that, I think, is really dangerous. And people are dismissive of that. And they're like, oh, my parents are this way and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, but you are too. And so now you have to make the decision to do something differently. And it's just like, if you can do that, and it's going to be really hard. Right. This is the thing I always tell people, like, this is going to be very, very difficult. Like you decide to come in, especially with me. And I know I'm not the coach for everybody. Trust me, I get it. Right. But if you come in this world with me, like, you're signing an agreement that this is the rest of your life. I'm 13 years into this journey. I still have a therapist. I still have a coach. I still go to events. I still read the books. I still listen to podcasts because I'm still not where I want to be. And it's like, great. I'm always healing. I'm always growing. I'm always changing. And that's the thing that I'm thinking about, in consideration that quantum is real, right? Which, Nicole, I'm sure you will agree with that in consideration of your name. We are healing not only the past in reciprocity, but the future, right? And
Yes.
we're doing that in perpetuity. And so when you're stepping up and you're changing yourself, you're healing a timeline that is so expansive that you don't even understand. And when you understand that you are changing the dynamic of everything that your family, really through the lack of education and information, could never step into, now you're doing something beyond just showing up for yourself. Because a lot of people have healed over the years, but not many people have done it in a way that they truly understand the impact that it has and the implications to change the world entirely. And people think that they have to be like me or you guys and be on stages and write books and podcasts, and it's like, no.
Yeah.
Maybe you're the first person in your family not to hit your kids. That's a big deal.
That's huge. Yeah. You know, just to be able to take your children and love them and hug them, and which with nothing but understanding would be a huge thing in today's world. Okay, so because time is flowing by, and if you have somebody who's going through all this, maybe they relate to your story or pieces of your story, because everybody's journey is different. The journey of moving forward is, we're all learning and we're all growing, God willing, and you know, we're all getting stronger. That's the perfect scenario in life, but not everybody lives that perfect life. What is the first step that somebody can take, or the first two steps to start moving forward?
Yeah, stop lying
To yourself.
to everybody.
Yeah.
Like, stop lying. You know, one of the things that people don't really understand about trauma is that the response to the way that we are as people is often indoctrinated in a parameter of safety that is built for survival, which means do not be you. Because if you are you, you are in danger, right? So, man, imagine that. Now you're like trying to figure out how to navigate this world, but the only thing you've ever understood is that every time I'm me, I get hurt.
Yeah.
Well, that's a difficult battle to face. And so what really begins, kind of like me in that mirror moment, I had to stop lying, period, to me. And look, it was very painful. It sucked really bad to have to go and tell the truth to people.
Do you think part of the lying to yourself is also part of societal conditioning that we have from the time we're young?
Of course. Yeah, I mean, God, look at schools. You're nothing but indoctrinated from the second you walk in. Raise your hand to go to the bathroom, walk on the right side of the hall, do the things I tell you in the way that I tell you to do them, or you get in trouble. Are you kidding me right now? I hate school so much. Like, even to this day, I hate school. Like, I think it is absolute nonsense. And that's just simply because, like, as a kid, I would always get kicked out of class for questioning everything.
That was me.
I'm like, explain to me why it's that way. Because that's the way it is. No, that's nonsense. That's nonsense. And so, like, anyway, you add that. I'll never forget. So I'm in 3rd or 4th grade, and we have this bulletin board, you know, the big cork board in the hallway when you come in the main part of the school.
Yeah.
And I went to a public school, like 98% black kids, 1% white kids, and then everybody else, right? And so what do most black kids in the hood want to do when they grow up? They want to be a basketball player or a rapper, right? That's what we know. That's what we see. And that was then. Life is very different now. We're talking about 30 years ago. Okay. Let's be very clear about this. There's a giant cork board in the middle of the hallway as soon as you come into school. And it says, you can be anything that you want, but you probably won't be a basketball player. I'll never forget that. And it's like, why would you take a child's dream from them?
Yeah.
I can be a basketball player if I want to. I don't need your limiting beliefs stopping me from what I'm capable of doing because you're scared.
Right.
So now you have that, you have the home, and then you have societal pressures to be somebody you're not. So people like you when they don't like you anyway, but you're not okay with that because you think people need to like you all the time. So cool. Now you're trying to navigate the world through truth. All right. Good luck with that journey. And so I sit here and I look at this, and it's just very simple. I acknowledge the one true reality. A lot of people don't like me. Some people do. But when I look in the mirror, I'm good with who I am. And that's the game. And it's like, if you can play that game, then you're going to win. But people are so terrified of this idea of not being liked, of being judged, of other people thinking about them. Nobody ain't thinking about you, man. Nobody's thinking about, like, how are you so egomaniacal that you think people are thinking about you? And so it's like, cool, if we take that out of the equation and we can say people aren't actually thinking about us, can I live my life on my terms? I mean, I'm 6'4", I'm covered in tattoos, gold nose ring in my nose. I say fuck all the time, and I'm worried about people judging me. How am I going to change the world?
Yeah.
And people are out here. I get it. There's so much indoctrination, and it's born into us from the moment we walk out the door for the first time into the world on our own. And then it's expounded on by our own homes, our communities, the media, the television, what we consume. And then again, to that point, we hold ourselves to this accord of perfection and being the greatest version of us all the time. I'm a nightmare sometimes. Like,
I hate to tell you,
it's super annoying. Right. And it's like, why can't we admit that? I'm not afraid to be like, I'm a pain in the ass, because I am. That doesn't mean I don't do good things. It just means that I'm not always this. And there's freedom.
That? Why do we have to have that? That's the whole thing. We don't have to be, it's like we are poured into a mold, and we have to be that mold for the rest of our lives. And that is just wrong.
Well, look at the mold I was poured into.
Yeah.
Oof.
I'm not that. Make a decision. It's very simple. Make a decision, face your fears, be the person you believe you're capable of being. Because on a long enough timeline, you can. Probably not tomorrow, right? I'm 13 years into this journey. I still don't know who I am, right?
And I think we change throughout. We change who we are just based on what's going on in our life, or what we've healed, or how we feel, or how we can view things differently. Yeah, you should be morphing your whole life. That's, if you're that stagnant, there's something wrong, that you're not changing into who you came to be at that moment.
I used to have this thing that I would say to people, and I would argue it's the most dangerous sentence a human could utter. People would be like, dude, you're an asshole. You're being rude to people. You're not taking care of yourself. Oh, look, your car got repoed. What are you doing? I'd be like, this is just who I am. If you're out here in the world and this is just who I am, you are losing this whole game. You are losing everything. And your own stubbornness and your own ego and your need to be right is keeping you stuck, period. And so it's like, can you let go of that? People want to be empowered. They want to reinvent themselves. And yet they're holding on to this notion that this is who they are. Statistically, and you can look at this, you can track it, you can measure it. The zip code you grow up in is a better indicator of success than any other variable in American society. I grew up in one of the worst zip codes in the entire country, and here I am. So you can be a statistic. Cool. You can be a statistic, or you can be an outlier.
But let's be real about something, Michael. Just because, and I hear what you say, and you're right. I'm speaking to you right now from Toronto, Canada, and we have areas in the city that are great, very wealthy areas, and we have very poor areas where there's majority of the crime.
Yeah.
But there's also homes that are very high level homes, or very wealthy homes, that do hurt their children, that do abuse their children. It doesn't matter what zip code you're from. It happens in every area and wherever you are.
Yeah.
It's not just in the poor areas. Unfortunately, it happens more, and there is more crime in those type of areas. But I've heard it, and it's each person, each home is an individual, and it happens no matter where.
Yeah, it does. And that's why I'm on this mission. My mission isn't in generational trauma in the hood. My mission is in generational trauma.
Period. Yeah. And
I love that, because, as a child, when I grew up in a different world, because I had family and brothers that were mentally challenged, and we were different. And I saw the hatred that people spewed at my family and me and my brothers that at some points, even them going out was dangerous because of how, if they were out, and still even to today, there's certain things that I'm very aware of as also to protect them. But it's very common that things are happening no matter where, when, or what level you're at, and that's what really needs to be done. So I understand you have a book that you've also written out, that is, I understand, a bestseller as well. Tell us about your book that can
Yeah.
maybe others.
Yeah, for sure. I've written a couple so far, which is very exciting. Very simply, I mean, a short story, because I know we're running out of time here. Basically, when I made a decision, I was going to buy a one-way ticket to Thailand and practice martial arts and sit on beaches and drink coconuts.
Wow.
And this is 5 years ago. And I'm having a conversation with this woman that I'd met, who she was telling me she had written a book. And I was like, you wrote a book? Like, how did you do that? And she's like, well, basically I sat down and I wrote a book. I was like, oh, that makes sense. And so I was like, I'm going to write a book. And I was going to write a book, and Think Unbroken, it's not about me, right? I mean, the preface is because context, but it's really about being a guide. It's very simple. It is a high level 101 introduction into just, can I plant a seed in people's head about what this journey is like if you make the decision to heal. And that's all it is. It's just planting a seed. Now, whether you go deeper with me or with somebody else or whatever, my hope is this just at least is something you can water a little bit. That's it. That's the whole thing.
And so many people need that little bit of a seed. Even if you're in a family where there's a lot of crime, anybody can come out, but it takes a lot of work.
Yeah. And it's just showing people possibility. Like, I am not an anomaly. I'm not special. I don't know anything you don't know. It's just that I'm willing to face my fears, probably more so than most people. And because of that, that's led me down this path. And if I can show people, hey, if you face your fear, which sucks because it does, on the other side of it, I mean, it's limitless. I mean,
Yes.
to go from literally not having water as a kid to flying first class and people waiting on me hand and foot, like, it's a very different experience. And I'm not saying like that's the marker for success. I'm just saying that's a thing, right? But most importantly, again, it always comes down to, from hating myself and being suicidal to loving myself enough that like I would never do that, right? Having a completely different space of self, of environment, of community, of support, of now being able to build and lead. And the book is about kind of that thing. Like, can we close the, so here's who you want to be and here's who you are, right? Can we just close that gap? That's all I'm ever thinking about. Can we close that gap and show you the path to being who you are with having support? And that's why I wrote the book.
And that's the key, it is having the support, because it's a long road to travel with, to do it on your own.
Whew.
Yeah, really.
You're the guest that we go, whew, that's, you're to hear your story, to look at you would never put two and two together. Never, and it's just, your story is amazing. I'm so grateful to meet you today. It's just very inspiring.
It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. No, it's one of those wow moments that you just, you kind of put your hand on your heart, and there's hope for many with a person like you out there.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah.
I mean, not even just for me, but like, I mean, all of this really comes down to like, are you going to do it or not?
Yeah.
That's it. And I just hope that people will do, like, I don't even, like, people ask me, am I a motivational speaker? Am I an inspirational speaker? I'm like, no, man, I'm just going to tell you the truth. You're not going to necessarily like all of it, but it'll be real.
Yeah.
And if you're paying attention, it'll change your life.
And that's what it's all about, making those changes to yourself so that you can live a better life. Having a child that isn't going to be hit, maybe, like just the little things in life that are actually huge. Well, how can somebody find you, Michael, if they're looking to get a little bit of help?
Yeah, I'm everywhere on social at Michael Unbroken. And I will literally coach anybody for free anywhere on the planet. If you go to thinkunbroken.com, if you go to thinkunbroken.com, there's like a form you can fill out and hop on a call with me.
I love it. Well,
Amazing.
Michael, it was an absolute honor to have you here today. And I am so grateful that you could join us and reach out and maybe touch somebody else's heart. Maybe even more so than just touching somebody who is healing from going through that, is maybe from somebody who actually goes and hurts others, that, they should stop and start thinking that when they're hitting somebody else, they're only showing and bringing out the anger because they've pushed down so many of their own feelings that they haven't healed. And that's how we stop all of this from continuing on. So before we go, do you have any last, wisdom, little words of wisdom that you can leave us with?
I mean, listen to this again.
One step at a time.
Yeah, just go back and just bury this stuff in your brain. I think the only way I've been able to get to where I am is I just kept burying it in my brain every day. Brainwashing is like about changing the way you think about the world because it's been dirtied up by other people. And I'm just trying to brainwash you. That's all.
Into a
That's
better
it. Easy stuff.
And Nicole, I know it's the hard things to be hearing, but it's the truth. And what can you suggest as our also energy healer here?
Well, I think one of the things you said is the most beautiful thing is it's the truth, because there's nothing better we can do than live our truth. And it's so interesting because I totally resonate with this statement is stop lying to yourself. Stop lying with who you think you are. You've been conditioned to be somebody. And yes, is it scary? But the minute you decide you want to find your truth, your wisdom, and your essence, look in the mirror, tell yourself, let's do it, be real with yourself, don't lie to yourself, and reach out to someone like Michael. That's the best thing you can do, because once you get past that conditioned person, and I know because I was there, what lies on the other side of that lie is your real truth and your real essence, and it is the most beautiful thing you will ever find.
That's right. Thank you very much. Some wise words today for those who have watched. And if you know of anybody who is going through times in their life, and it doesn't have to be to the extreme that Michael has been through, but everybody's got some bit of horror that they've had to go through in one way or another. And we're not here to judge one another. We're just here to help one another. So the most important thing, if you've been watching or you're listening to this now, is to reach out and ask for help, because that's what it's really all about in life. None of us are on this journey to be by ourselves. We're all here to help one another. And that's, to me, what it's really all about. So today, thank you, Michael, for being so true and honest and for giving us such incredible truth. It's really what it is. And it's not a great, beautiful picture, but I'm proud of you of what you've done and for being out there for so many others. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.